today we're talking about building plans to permits. So how do you go from you have a piece of property that you are looking to purchase, and assuming you want to, I guess you can do the same thing if you're going to buy an existing home and renovate or convert. But assuming in the context of this call, you're going to be purchasing a piece of vacant land and you want to build your memory care mansion on it. So we'll kind of walk you through a high level of the steps and kind of a sequence of events. And then I'll show you some of my plans that to give you some context for some of these things. So we'll be talking about the architect, we'll be talking about engineers, and AHJ, authority having jurisdiction. So any like local, like it's kind of an all-encompassing term for like your city, your health department, your fire marshal, anybody who has jurisdiction, a local authority. So we'll talk about some of that AHJ, kind of all goes in this sequence here. So I kind of break this down in my mind with like two tracks, two different like sequences of events that will merge together. But I break this down into really like the land and the building, and they can be done at different times from each other. So we've talked in some of these other calls about the civil engineer. We did like a site plan call talking about doing like a rough draft site plan. So that kind of falls under the land part of it. So let's start over there and we'll unpack this. So in the land column, right, you have your land. You're going to identify this piece of property that you want to purchase. Okay, regardless if it's 1 acre, 5 acres, half acre, doesn't matter. You got this piece of property, right? And usually one of the first things that you do, or that I have done, is I will literally like do my rough draft site plan. Like before I give it to any kind of engineering company, before I give it to the city or the fire marshal, I'll literally go and like find either the survey or screenshot the boundary lines on like Google Earth. And I'll do kind of just a rough draft of a site plan to see like roughly where is everything going to go? Is this fitting? And I usually will do this before we even purchase the property, before we purchase the land, so that I know that obviously my project will fit. It'll work on this piece of property. I'll do my due diligence on utilities and things like that in that section, right? Put it all on this site plan. So we're going to go from land to site plan, my rough draft site plan. And then we're going to get the civil engineer involved. And the civil engineer is going to really do everything with your land, with your property, not the building part, and we'll circle back to that, but the actual like land, and where does the building sit on the land, and where do all the utilities go on the land, and where's the driveway going to go, and what's the drainage like, and what's the turn in from the road, and all of those kind of things. They're going to put together that whole thing. But part of that with the civil engineer is where exactly is the building going to go? And they're going to tie the building into the utilities. So now, are the utilities in the front or the back? Is the drainage, is the power, all the MEP items, are those, where are those in the building? Are in the front, the back, the side? Those have to be, they have to work together. Like the civil engineer needs to know these things. So I say all this in context of your civil engineer, before you can submit everything, you're going to have all of these things on the right side of this column done, all the building things. So let's kind of talk about that, and then we're going to put it all together and then kind of paint a sequence of events for picture, for you to have a full picture of this. So the building, right, at least for me, before I got into real estate and started doing this, I always saw like these buildings and like these like two-dimensional floor plans. And I kind of thought that was it. Like, oh yeah, it's just like this one page, like here's all my bedroom and it tells me the measurements and stuff. It's my top-down two-dimensional floor plan, right? And I didn't realize how many layers of other things have to be built out before somebody can actually go and build this. You can't just give them a two-dimensional floor plan and say, okay, go build it, because they're going to ask, well, what about all the other things, right? Like, what type of wood do I need? Where are my headers? Where are my studs? Where are these pipes supposed to go? Where's the electrical supposed to go? And then what's all the voltage on these things? What size panel is it going to be? And somebody has to figure out all of these items. So let's kind of overview through this today and hopefully make it in a kind of step-by-step sequence that makes it easy for you to understand. And then we'll kind of wrap it all up. So for me, this is what I did and kind of the sequence of events that I went through. So for me, even before I bought the land, that we started going through and working this whole thing, I had been spending a lot of time literally drawing out my own floor plan. Before I got to an architect, I literally used like those grid sheet papers, right? The little boxes. And I just ran through probably like at least 20 versions at minimum of different ideas I had. And I knew I wanted to have a 16-bedroom home. And I knew roughly what the square footage was gonna be. I know it was gonna be like, maybe 7,000-8,000, something like that. That was kind of where I started. But I drew these 16 bedrooms. I drew it with bathrooms, without bathrooms, closets here, closets there. Where's my kitchen going to be? I drew so many different variations of what I wanted. And that's kind of what I started with. Now I got actually pretty dang close to what my final product is now, just literally with my sketch pad and drawing it all out. Now, obviously it wasn't to the inch or anything, but it was within probably 6 inches of these walls and things. So I at least had my placement or my rough idea, and I took that and then I moved to the next step. So after, actually, I think it was before we even bought the land of this deal, because we had been under contract in multiple pieces of land that a couple of them didn't work out on. So I had already, I believe, hired the architect and sent him my floor plans, my literal, like I scanned what I had and I had all the rough measurements written on it. I'm like, hey, here's what I want you to build. And then feel free to critique, give me any of your ideas, but I want you to build this out with roughly with this idea in mind. And here I think I recorded this in a video when I sent it to him. Here's like the backing, here's the why behind all of these things. So I don't want you to change it for no reason. Change it if you need to change it, but change it according to here are my goals for some of these items. So from floor plan, from me doing this myself, it's kind of the same track as on the site plan, right? Where I'm literally like going and putting in, here's the building and the roads and things. I'm doing my own rough draft, and then I'm sending it to the architect and the civil engineer. So on both sides there, kind of doing my pregame before I send it to them. Because in my experience, when I've talked to these different assisted living architects, they will give you a small box. They will give you something with like a long dark hallway and bedrooms on both sides. And I mean, you walk in the front door and you see the office and has like that cutout for the nurse station. And it's just hideous and it's horrible. And they look like all the other ones. And I hate it with a passion. So I didn't want that. So I drew up my own, right? And I spent many months trying to figure out and toy with this and play with it to get what I wanted. So anyways, from sequence of events here, right? I built my own out, my rough draft. Then I sent it to the architect. And I'll show you what that looks like. But the architect does not only the 2D, that's what he started with, all the 2D, right? And then he sent that to me back and forth. It took 3-4 months as we went through everything. So you layer out the 2D, then he's going to go through and he's going to build out, okay, now here's the walls, here's the roof pitch, where's the windows, what are the window sizes? I'll show you actually an example to kind of put it in perspective for you, all the different things he'll have to do, including all the different ADA stuff, and then all the different local AHJ stuff for any authority, specifically like for licensure, having to put all of that kind of stuff in there. So once my architectural was done, my full plan set of architectural drawings, then I wasn't done yet. Then I had to take those drawings and send it to a structural engineer. So a structural engineer will take those and then build out he's going to call for all the different beams and headers and pieces of wood, right? You're going to need, these are going to be 2x4s. These are going to be 2x6s. These are going to be, these like LVLs. These are going to be, here's going to be your header. Your support beam is going to be here and here and here, right? And they have to run all of these calculations on these things. So I couldn't get a structural done until I had my architectural done, right? Because they have nothing to check as far as the structure, right? So the structure will do the actual framing, the wind bracing, the slab as well. And I'll show you what that looks like. But they're going to do that. And then after the structural is done, then you send it to the MEP. So the MEP is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So then there's another separate engineer who needs to find out, okay, now you have the building and you have where all the beams and pieces of wood and everything are. Where do all the electrical lines run? Because they can't run right through the middle of a beam, right? Where does all your plumbing lines run? Your incoming water, your outgoing Sewage, where does your gas lines run? What about your HVACs and your electricals? You're going to have these huge ducts. You have to make sure that they can get ducting everywhere. And then they have to determine all those volume of water and requirements for pressure, electrical, add everything up, and then put all your breakers everywhere, your sub panels, all that kind of stuff, right? Once all of that's done, so you can't do the MEP until the structural is done because they have to know where all the beams and everything are going to be. Then there's the fire, right? If you're going to have fire suppression, then you have to send it to your fire suppression company. And you may be able to do these last two things after you've submitted for permits, but I do want to put it in there because it does have to get done. There's still engineering on the fire sprinklers and on the fire alarm because they have to know, they have to have the actual structure of the building in CAD and then build everything out. Here's where all your pipes and everything's going to be. They have to measure pressure and then the rise for, you know, as if you're going to put sprinklers at the top of the ceiling versus at the bottom of the ceiling, there's going to be different pressures for elevation and things like that. So there's that. And then there's your local health department. It may be, all of them are kind of different and they may have different requirements, but that may be something you need to consider at that point. If you built this whole thing in, what are their requirements as far as like sinks and hand washing sinks and all that kind of stuff? So let me give you some context on this. Let's see here. Okay, so here is my architectural. So we'll talk through this sequence of events on the right side, everything relating to the building. So let's see. This is 10 pages, something like that. And you can kind of see if there's a table of contents here. And so you can kind of go through and you can see if I can zoom in. So cover page with general notes, life safety, ADA notes, keynotes, elevations, foundation, floor plan, elevation, roof pitches. So let's take a look. But ultimately, your architect needs to do all of these kind of things, right? It's not just about this like 2D floor plan. They will do the 2D floor plan and need to have all the measurements. But in addition to that, there's a bunch of other stuff they have to do here. So this is all door swings. This is all relating to ADA, and that's really important for what we do. Then they get into all the windows. Where are your windows? What size are they? Which way are they opening? So you need a window schedule. You need a door schedule. So for us, they actually put in all our custom accent walls and custom trim work and casing. So you can see that in there. So they literally are marking like where all the windows are. And again, we're still looking at like a kind of a 2D version. Then they did these elevations for, again, all of our trim work. Where is everything going to be? So you can see now here's the, you know, windows, doors, all that kind of stuff. They're going to show like, here's the headers, here's the beams between these double windows, but they're not going to call for what type of headers and what type of support are going to be there. That's what you have to send this to the structural next after that. All right, so here's kind of the elevations of the interior and the great room. And then let's see here. All right, then they're showing foundation. So again, you have to consider your back porch, your front porch. Is it all part of the same foundation? And that'll go to the structural engineer as well. They got elevations. So they're going to be talking at this point about roof pitch. So they're measuring off roof pitch and where everything's going to go. What kind of pop outs do you want to have? There's a lot of things that they can make it look very vanilla and plain if they're not very skilled. Or you can do a fantastic job by your exterior stuff with the different roof pitches. So this is where Laura got involved, talked a lot about the exterior siding, what type of stonework we'll have, what type of other siding up at the roof. So these are all different types of sidings that we have and hardy and different things. So that there is texture and there is variation and it's not kind of vanilla. Let's see. Okay, so then more talking about the roof. So everything has to be all calculated for the roof, for drainage, and to make sure everything works and flows. Then you get into the electrical stuff on the interior. So he's not going to be calculating the voltage and amps and things like that. That's what the MEP will do, but the MEP needs to know all this stuff to figure that out. So before that, here's literally all of our CAN lights, and then it literally goes back to showing like, okay, here's where the outlet's going to be. He's going to have all the specs on the different kind of outlets. What are the load requirements will be figured out by the MEP. and where are all the sub panels and that kind of thing. So this does not show all the sub panels and main panels and distribution stuff. The MEP has to build that out based on this. And so that's why you kind of have to go in these sequence of events. So there is our architectural. Let's look at structural next. Let's see. Okay, so here's my structural. So you go from the architectural and then you give it to the structural. Structural is going to figure out everything you're going to build, how to build it, and then also your foundation. So you have all these notes on the foundation, on the roof, on the framing, on the wind bracing. So this is them going through and they're going to identify where the beams are. So we're not talking about wood beams, we're talking about actually concrete beams. So when they build the foundation out of concrete, they'll actually pour deeper beams in there to strengthen that. So they have to build all that stuff out. They have to engineer that. And then here's the concrete footings. They got to spec what those are going to be. You can't just hire, like your builder can't just bring in a concrete company and like pour 6-inch slab, right? They have to know exactly, also your builder's liable for this kind of stuff if your stuff starts cracking, especially as you're talking about these bigger buildings like this, because they're so long that you can actually get kind of a buckle in there over time if you haven't accounted for the soil and these different things on the foundation. So then next, this is everything doing with ceiling framing here. So I've zoomed in on this and looked at every single beam, but it will tell you like, okay, here's your 2x4s, here's your 2x6s, 2x8s, here's your beams, how thick are these beams, and all that kind of stuff. What is supporting what, especially as you're getting to all these roof pitches and what is going to hold up your building. So all of that has to be determined. So let's see, more roof framing. Oh no, this is roof framing. The one before that was ceiling framing. And then wind bracing. Some of this is more applicable in areas where you have bigger storms and tornadoes and things like that. You'll have to have that specialty done if that's applicable. Then how are you going to tie everything together? So literally your builder can come in and look at all these specs and be like, okay, well, they're calling for this type of connection and brace, right? They want this type of beam and it's going to be hooked up with these series of, 2x8s. Are we going to use roof trusses or not? And all that kind of stuff is in here. So you can see like, here's actually the wall. Here's a single story, double story wall, all these kind of examples. So that is what your structural will do. So you need your architect to give you your structural. Now, once you have your structural, then you can go to your MEP. So MEP again is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So here's all the notes from the MEP. So here's our lighting plan. So he took what the architect built out as far as my lighting structure, and then he built out, okay, here's all the load, here's all the power, and that's going to work backwards into how does this come in, what type of panels do I need, what type of sub panels do I need, what is the electrical load that I need to get and make sure I can get from the electric company, from the power company. So here's our power plan here, and this kind of shows where all the sub panels are in the building and then where all the main panels are. So here, like all the main panels are over here, and then actually in all the bedrooms and a couple different hallway areas, there is sub panels. So it makes a big difference. It's actually way cheaper to do it that way because you're not running huge wires to every room. You can kind of just run a sub panel to the middle of the house and then run smaller wires off of that. So he'll spec out all these different panels here. So let's see if I can get a little closer. Panel A, distribution panel, panel K. So all these different panels have different purposes and they're being used. So again, your builder can't just go and run electrical, right? They have to know what exactly they're running to where. And then here's like the spec out for our main distribution panel. You can see like the meter, and then it comes in and then it splits off to these other panels. So how many amps of a panel do you need? And do you need multiple panels and breakers and all that kind of stuff? So they'll figure all that for electrical. And then they're also going to do the mechanical. So here is an example of the HVAC. So in the attic, you are going to have all this ducting for your common areas. You may have your own bedrooms have their own like PTAC or mini split like we do here, but you still need like condensation lines for drainage. And then, so you need to know, again, your HVAC company can't just throw this in there. They need to know like how wide does this duct have to be? And then it has to literally like calcs for the whole square footage of the two-dimensional floor plan times the ceiling height to make sure it'll properly cool everything. And then so they'll take that and then they'll spec out the actual like systems. Here's what they're calling by like brand and serial number for what model of HVAC system, kitchen hood, same with like your water heaters, all that kind of stuff. Let's see what's next. Okay, then you have water. So water, where are all the incoming water pipes gonna be running? Obviously, they're gonna come from the exterior and then go through the attic or underground to get to you. How is all that gonna go? Where is it gonna go? Your plumber can't put that in without knowing. And then drainage, right? You're gonna have all these bathrooms that are all gonna drain somewhere. How does it connect on your land to where your sewer is or your septic is? It is in the front, is in the back, is on the sides. So all of those things have to be put together. Let's see what's next. Then it's propane and gas. The natural gas, what does that look like? Where is that pipe going to come and go from? So here's that spec right there. Again, your plumber can't just throw it in wherever he feels like it. He needs to know exactly where it's supposed to be. So that's what the MEP does. So again, in this kind of sequence of events, right, you have to have the architectural done to give the structural. The structural guy is going to now he's going to be literally tying, off the water pipes and the drainage pipes. They're into the studs. So they have to know exactly where the walls are. And so they have to have the structural stuff done. So it's kind of a sequence of events, right? From you can do this yourself, the floor plan, send it to the architect, send it to the structural, send it to the MEP. And actually it took, for me, a heck of a long time to get through all of that kind of stuff. And then you can probably submit here. And then it depends. Most likely you have a fire permit and health department. That might be a separate step. So let me kind of just tie it together here. If I go down. So you're running, I think of it as like these two tracks, right? You have your land and then you have your building. Because honestly, this building can be done before you even purchase the land, as long as you were going to commit to it, right? But then the land, you obviously have to have the land for that. So you have to have these two kind of tracks going on here, and then they kind of converge here, right? You have your civil stuff, everything relating to the land, and then your architect and engineer stuff relating to the building kind of come together, right? You have to everyone has to kind of work together on these things to make sure, and there's a lot of back and forth as one engineer says, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to do this. Then you have to go back to your other engineer, your other architect, and change it to make it work. So a lot of back and forth to be able to get there, to get your building plans like finally done with all these different things. And then you can use that to submit for permits. So that is the rough overview there on this whole thing.